When we sit, the pond or the lake that is our mind quiets and quiets and quiets.
I can think of it like I do this house, okay? You start putting things away, you start cleaning up, you think a little bit more clearly.
There's a wonderful Zen teaching story, Buddhist teaching story of, you see it like throwing pebbles into a pond. And you can't keep throwing those pebbles. In order to see what's really at the bottom and let the mud settle, you have to let it quiet down.
I don't ponder over why questions hardly at all anymore. It's not important to know why. Most of the time you never will anyway.
And when we do that, we can have the direct experience of thinking thoughts, identifying the thoughts as thinking, and seeing the mind in a different way.
Nominally, I was raised as a Catholic. That is to say, I was baptized as a Catholic, and I was forced into Catholic schools at a young age when I rebelled and ended up in the public school, and I was forced into catechism, and I rebelled many times, and I finally got through the catechism treatment, and at the expense of being a better pitcher in baseball, I attended the catechism classes, but I never completely got confirmed because I left in the middle of the ceremony. Oh, I kept asking questions that the nuns hated. I asked questions like, if God is all good and God is all powerful, how is there evil in the world? And it seemed logical to me, but the nuns didn't appreciate my poor attitude. And so I was escorted out many times. It got to the point where I used to take a baseball glove and my baseball with me because I knew I would be dismissed before anyone else.
When we moved to South Carolina, it kind of put my teenage life into great upheaval. I was, I think, 13 or 14 and just was real sensitive and just was real shaken up by it and had a really hard transition, and ended up kind of acting out in teenage ways and causing myself a lot of pain and being in constant conflict with my parents. So I was going through kind of a rebellion thing. So when they wanted me to be confirmed around the same time that we moved to South Carolina, I started to, because of the already rebellious place that I was in, started to question the church that they wanted me to be confirmed in. And not all of it was just rebellion, some of it was sincere. I had questions at the time, like, if there's a God, I want to be able to find God myself. Or when I was in confirmation classes and there was a lot of pressure to be confirmed, I asked, if it's so true, why do I feel like they're pushing it on me? Because if it's true, then it should be available to everyone, and there shouldn't have to be any pressure to accept it as true, because it should be obvious.
One day I was taking a course, I think it was in my junior year of school. It was a required course in comparative religion. The teacher was a Chinese fellow from Taiwan. I could tell when he got to Buddhism that he was passionate. There was a passion in his voice that came. This was a Chinese man speaking from a Buddhist society that had been overridden by Christianity and then pushed down by communism. And we cornered him again after class, and he admitted, he said, well, if you squeeze me hard, I'm a Buddhist. And I kept asking him questions. Why are you a Buddhist? And he kept saying, because it's reasonable.
I think today that I spent most of my adult life trying to avoid Zen. It's true. I learned a lot about it and learned a lot about Buddhism and was always a seeker. I've traveled to Nepal and to Tibet. I did, I've been to a number of unity churches and hugged plenty of strangers and danced in new moon rituals and gone for healings and loved Hare Krishna and chanted the Hanuman Chalisa and kind of was on what I thought was spiritual seeking. And what I came to realize was that it was the activity of seeking that was my biggest obstacle to finding.
I was living in Syracuse, New York at the time, teaching English, and at a business school, and somebody gave me this copy of Zenbo, and I saw the address, and I realized I'm in Syracuse, New York. This is Rochester, New York. This is only 90 miles from here. I'm going to drive over there. I drove over there. I rang the doorbell of the Rochester Zen Center. It was a big temple, and a guy answered the door, and he said, "We're closed." This was Saturday. I'd never been to Rochester before, so he said, "This is Saturday, we're closed, but we're going to have a workshop next weekend. If you want to, you come to that workshop." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll come to the workshop." So I did. And I went to the workshop. It was a Saturday workshop, and we were invited back to Sunday Teisho, which is the Dharma talk and sitting and all. Well, as soon as the chanting started in Teisho, I burst into tears. I've never felt so at home in my life. As hard as it was to sit still, as hard as it was with the discipline and whatnot, as much as I didn't understand what was happening, I was intimidated by it, I felt like, well, this is a real spiritual practice. You have to do something here. You do not have to believe anything. You have to question your way into this and concentrate. This is for me. And that's when I became a Buddhist.
I'm a lung cancer survivor, 8 years this year. And it was a tumor the size of a tangerine in my left inferior lobe of my lung, which was removed, and chemotherapy and radiation and all of the nightmare of that, and on a scale of 4, with 4 being the greatest lung cancer nightmare, mine was a 3A. 2 out of 10 people survive. And I'm one of the statistical 2. And I had, I think that what was really at the bottom of my search for all those years was I really wanted to be the great bliss queen. And whatever it was that would help me to be the great bliss queen, to experience happiness and bliss, open-hearted, open-mindedness was what I wanted. And I longed for a personal God. I think a lot of seekers do. That to feel, to have the experience of safety and security, that there is a creator, and this creator cares about me personally and what happens to me personally.
As a teenager, when you're first introduced to concepts of peace and justice and social equality and stuff like that, it's like a really big deal. And I remember learning about Gandhi and being interested in the whole passive resistance way to bring about change. And I was like, I wonder if there's some truth to Eastern religion. So I got a book on Buddhism out of the school library, and I read the first noble truth: all life is suffering. And I was like, all life is suffering? Life isn't suffering. What are they talking about? And then as it got difficult for me trying to adjust to this very conservative high school and just the whole Charleston, South Carolina world, which was new to me, I was like, there's something to that. So then at that point I picked up another book, probably around 9th grade, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and read it religiously every morning and tried to meditate in the morning before school, and then tried to meditate before I went to bed.
I was at my oncologist, and I had just had the, what do they call it, the benchmark CT scan. This was after surgery and radiation and chemotherapy. And he read it, and he said, well, there's scarring on that lung, and it, looks like a mass. Kind of, we don't think it is. There's a mass there, and we think it's scarring. We don't think it's a tumor. And I said, what do you mean? You can't tell? No, you can't tell. Well, my mass, the tumor looked like, yes, that's right. And I stood there, and with all of the wonderful uncertainty and truth of life and the nature of life, and I asked this man who I trust so dearly, I said, when will we be certain? And he said, never.